Welcome back to the Shigeaki Podcast, where we don't just talk about aging, we talk about aging with clarity, with strength, and with dignity. I'm Dr. Mark Hyman, and today I want to start with a story that's both funny and a little heartbreaking. A patient of mine, George 72, came into my office recently and said, "Mark, I can still calculate bridge load-bearing stress from the 80s, but I forgot my granddaughter's birthday last week." He laughed, but I could see the fear behind it. George had stopped napping. He said they made him groggy. But what he didn't realize, and what most people over 60 don't know, is that when done properly, a nap is one of the most powerful tools for protecting memory, calming the heart, and refreshing the brain. The secret isn't just in taking the nap. It's in how you prepare your body and brain before it happens. And no one on this earth understands that deeper than my guest today, a man I'm humbled to speak with every time we sit down, Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, neurologist educator, and one of Japan's most respected physicians. He's treated more than 100,000 patients, written over 150 books on health and longevity. And yes, he's lived for over a century, with a sharp mind, a steady heart, and a mission to help others age with grace. Dr. Hinohara, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Mark. It is always an honor to speak about aging, not as a decline, but as an evolution. You know, in Japan we say a wise man naps not to escape the day, but to return to it with deeper vision. I have seen through my decades of practice how even a short midday nap, when respected and prepared for, can restore memory, regulate blood pressure, and lift depression in the elderly. But it must be done with care, with intention.
And today, that's what we're diving into. Why your brain after 60 needs short naps more than ever. Why many seniors feel worse, not better after napping. The powerful foods and drinks you can eat before a nap to enhance memory and relaxation. And the Japanese nap ritual that Dr. Hinohara has taught for decades, which just might change how you age one afternoon at a time. If you've ever felt sluggish after lunch, if your memory is slipping, or if you simply want to wake up feeling like yourself again, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. Most people think if I'm tired, I'll nap. If not, I'll skip it. But what they don't realize is that by the time you feel tired, especially after 60, your brain has already begun to drift into overload. I often compare it to a phone battery. By early afternoon, even if you haven't done much, your brain's glucose regulation, neural firing, and short-term memory are fading. You've used up mental currency. The nap is not indulgent, it's essential.
Yes, but here is the paradox, Mark. As we age, we need naps more yet. Our bodies make it harder to take them. Many of my patients tell me I lie down, but I can't fall asleep. Or they say I nap, but I wake up confused or more tired. This is not failure, it is physiology. After 60, our levels of melatonin and GABA, the two hormones that help slow brain activity, decline naturally. At the same time, cortisol, the alertness hormone, often stays high in the early afternoon due to stress or erratic blood sugar. The result, the brain wants to rest but doesn't know how to switch gears.
That makes perfect sense. In functional medicine, we see this all the time, older adults losing the brake pedal of their nervous system. They get stuck in low-grade fight or flight. They lie down to nap, but their heart still races. Their mind keeps spinning, and what should have been 20 minutes of restoration becomes 40 minutes of frustration. But here's what I find fascinating and hopeful. We can prime the brain to nap again. Just like we warm up muscles before a workout, we can nourish and calm the brain before a nap. And it starts with what we eat.
Yes. I always tell my patients, don't go to sleep hungry. Don't go to sleep overloaded. Feed your brain, not your belly. Many people eat a heavy lunch with rice, meat, and sweets, and then wonder why their nap feels like a coma. Others eat nothing and wonder why they feel shaky and anxious while lying down. There is a middle path, a way to gently prepare the brain to receive rest.
Let's set the stage. The ideal nap comes 1 to 2 hours after a light lunch. But what you eat right before your nap, or even during your lunch, can make or break how your brain recovers. Think of it this way. The aging brain needs a small insulin response, not a spike. A touch of tryptophan to convert into serotonin and melatonin. A bit of magnesium or potassium to ease muscle and nerve tension. And absolutely no caffeine or sugar crash within 2 hours of napping.
Exactly. And I would add, in Japan it is common to drink Mujicha roasted barley tea after lunch. It is naturally caffeine-free, rich in GABA-like compounds, and helps cool the body gently without sedation. Also, many elderly people in rural Japan eat a few soaked almonds, a banana slice, or a small square of sweet potato before reclining. Not because it's a tradition, but because over generations we have learned. The right food makes the nap a gift. The wrong food makes it a burden.
I love that. And that's what we'll dive into next. In part 3, we'll share the top natural foods and drinks you should eat before your nap to improve memory, calm the nervous system, and wake up feeling restored, not foggy. Because aging doesn't mean less rest. It means you have to rest smarter. So let's get practical. Now that we understand why the aging brain needs naps and why it struggles to access them, the next question is, how do we prepare the body for a nap that actually heals? As always, food is the gateway. Not a meal, not a pill, just a small targeted bite of the right thing at the right time.
Yes. In Japan, we always begin with the idea that small is sacred. We are not looking to sedate the brain. We are looking to nourish the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your body that allows you to slow down and recover. Over the years, I've found that the best pre-nap foods share 4 key qualities. They don't spike blood sugar. They contain natural precursors to calming neurotransmitters, like tryptophan, GABA, or magnesium. They are easy to digest, no bloating, no cramping, and they offer comfort without heaviness.
Let's walk through some of your favorites, and I'll explain the science behind them. 1. Banana, 1:2 to 1 small ripe banana.
Bananas are a favorite of mine, especially for older adults. They contain natural sugars, but not in excess. More importantly, they offer potassium and vitamin B6, both of which help regulate nerve function and convert tryptophan into serotonin. And serotonin, as we know, is the pathway to melatonin, your sleep hormone.
Yes, and a banana is gentle on the stomach, quick to absorb, and provides stable energy without caffeine. It also has a little magnesium, which acts like a natural muscle relaxant. 2. Soaked almonds, 4 to 6 pieces. Almonds are packed with magnesium protein and small amounts of healthy fat, which keep your blood sugar stable and calm the nervous system. Soaking them overnight reduces phytic acid and makes them easier to digest, especially for seniors.
Yes, in Japan we often serve a few soaked almonds with warm tea to elderly patients recovering from surgery, because it supports both mental clarity and physical stillness. It's light but deeply satisfying.
3. Mujicha roasted barley tea.
This is perhaps one of Japan's best-kept secrets. Mujicha is a naturally caffeine-free tea made from roasted barley. It has a toasty, slightly nutty flavor, and it helps cool the body, calm digestion, and reduce internal heat from stress. I've seen patients with poor sleep improve simply by switching from green tea to Mujicha in the afternoon.
And I'll add studies show that barley compounds may act as GABA mimetics, meaning they bind to the same calming receptors in the brain. That's a major plus when your nervous system is overstimulated. 4. Whole grain toast, plus tahini or almond butter, 1/2 slice. A slice of whole grain bread with a thin spread of tahini or almond butter does wonders. You're combining complex carbs, which help tryptophan cross the blood-brain barrier with healthy fats and amino acids. Just make sure the bread is low in sugar and high in fiber.
And chew slowly. Half a slice eaten with awareness becomes a powerful nap tonic. Too many people eat fast, lie down bloated, and expect the body to relax. But the body responds to presence, not just nutrients.
5. Warm milk with cinnamon, only for non-dairy sensitive individuals.
A traditional bedtime remedy that still works. Warm milk contains casein tryptic peptides, which can trigger calmness in the brain. Add a pinch of cinnamon, and you not only improve taste, but also help regulate blood sugar before rest.
Absolutely. But always listen to your body. Some people don't tolerate dairy well after 60. In that case, you can use unsweetened almond milk or oat milk warmed gently with the same soothing effect. Bonus, small piece of steamed sweet potato.
This is very common in rural Japan. 1 or 2 bites of steamed sweet potato offers slow-release carbs, potassium, and a natural feeling of warmth and fullness. It's grounding, and it teaches the body that it is safe to rest.
That's beautiful, and it proves that the best medicine often comes from the kitchen, not the pharmacy.
So my advice is this. Before your nap, choose just one of these, not all. Eat slowly, drink warm, then recline for 20 minutes even if you don't fall asleep. It is the intention to rest paired with nourishment that begins the healing.
Exactly. This isn't about sedation. It's about teaching your brain to return to a rhythm, one that restores, not just pauses. We've talked about why naps are important. We've talked about what to eat to prepare the brain for rest. Now let's talk about how to actually nap the Japanese way. The way Dr. Hinohara has used to help thousands of older adults recover not just energy, but mental clarity. Because here's the truth. Most people nap incorrectly. They lie down in bed, close the blinds, turn off all sound, then either fall into deep sleep for hours or lie awake frustrated. But the Japanese nap ritual is different. It's not about escaping the day. It's about creating a sacred pause within it.
Yes. In Japan, we call it shinmin, the mindful rest. It is not about falling asleep. It is about teaching the nervous system how to let go even briefly. This kind of nap doesn't require a bed or darkness or silence. What it needs is a light-fed room, a relaxed but supported posture, a clear signal to the brain that we are safe to rest. Let me walk you through the full ritual. Step 1. Time it right 1 through 3 p.m. The ideal time to nap is between 1 suru and 3 berzuru p.m. This is when the natural dip in body temperature and alertness occurs. If you nap too late after 3:30 or 4:00, it begins to interfere with nighttime melatonin production. And naps longer than 30 minutes can push the brain into deep sleep, causing sleep inertia, where you wake up groggy and disoriented. So the sweet spot, 15 to 25 minutes only.
Yes, and research backs that up. A Harvard study found that a 20-minute nap improved word recall and learning speed by 35% in people over 60, while longer naps actually worsened reaction time for the rest of the day.
Where to nap, not in bed.
This one surprises a lot of people. You don't need a full mattress, blackout curtains, or pajamas. In fact, those may confuse your circadian rhythm.
Correct. In Japan, many elderly people nap in a reclining chair, or even on a tatami mat with a neck support. The goal is to stay light, not fall into full nighttime sleep. We want muscle relaxation without total shutdown. Your environment should be bright, but not harsh. Quiet, but not silent. Cool, but not cold. You can use a small pillow behind your neck and keep your legs slightly elevated. This position signals the parasympathetic system to activate without letting the brain fall into deep REM cycles. Step 3. Breathe with intention before closing eyes. Before you close your eyes, take 5 slow breaths. Inhale for 4 counts. Exhale for 6 counts. This longer exhale helps trigger the vagus nerve, slowing heart rate and reducing cortisol. I often whisper to myself, this moment is for repair, not for thinking.
And I tell my patients, think of the nap not as unconsciousness, but as a controlled surrender. You are not escaping. You are realigning.
Step 4. Wake gently, no alarms if possible.
If you can avoid it, don't use a loud alarm. Use a chime, a vibration, or even just natural light from a nearby window. The moment you wake, remain still for 30 seconds. Stretch the hands and feet. Roll the neck gently.
Let the nervous system come back online slowly. If you rush back to standing, you lose all the neurochemical benefits you just earned. Give yourself a moment of stillness. It is not doing nothing. It is finishing the nap properly. Boners pair it with a soft task afterward.
After the nap, don't jump straight into news phones or decision-making. Do something tactile and calm. Water your plants. Write a note by hand. Fold something. Stretch with music. These soft landings reinforce the message to your brain. You just healed. Let's carry that calm forward.
So to summarize the Japanese nap ritual is eat lightly with calming foods. Nap between 1 to 3 p.m. for 15 to 25 minutes. Sit in a reclined or supported posture, not a bed. Breathe slowly, especially before closing your eyes. Wake without rushing and transition gently. This is not luxury. This is neurological hygiene.
I love that phrase, neurological hygiene. We brush our teeth, we wash our hands, but few of us take time to clean our thoughts, our fatigue, or our mental stress, and a proper nap can do all three. So let's step back. Today we didn't talk about drugs. We didn't talk about diagnostics or diseases. We talked about something ancient, natural, and incredibly powerful, the nap. Not the kind of nap that leaves you groggy and confused, but a nap that's light, intentional, and designed to heal your brain. And what we've learned is that how you prepare for a nap, what you eat, how you breathe, where you lie, matters just as much as the nap itself. Because after 60, rest is no longer optional. It's sacred, strategic, necessary.
Yes. And in my 100 years of life, I've learned this: the older we become, the more our healing depends on rhythm, not effort. The nap is not laziness, it is wisdom in motion. When we pause for 20 minutes with soft food, soft posture, soft light, we give the brain a gift that no supplement can replace. A moment to restore what is slipping. A moment to cleanse the fog of noise. A moment to remember who we are beneath the fatigue.
That's so beautifully said, Doctor. And I want to remind everyone listening, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need a spa or a special chair. You just need to start with one small practice. A banana, a handful of almonds, a quiet chair at 2 p.m., 5 deep breaths. That is your medicine.
And if you think it's too late to change, I will gently say, it is never too late to rest with intention. Every nap is a new chance, a new rhythm, a new repair, a chance to stop rushing and begin listening to what your body has been asking for all along.
So if today's episode helped you, even a little, please subscribe to the Shigeaki Podcast. Share this with someone over 60 who struggles to feel sharp or rested. And leave us a review. It helps bring these conversations to more people who need gentle, science-backed guidance on aging well.